This is a story of a daughter who loved her father so much that she gave him life from her own body. Please, father, please don't leave me. Not like this. Not in this place. I need you. I still need you. Those were the words that 18-year-old Morenike whispered every night as she pressed her trembling hands against the cold iron bars that separated her from her father. Her fingers would wrap around the rusted metal, squeezing so hard that her knuckles turned white and her palms bled. She didn't care about the pain. Physical pain was nothing compared to the agony tearing through her heart. This is not a story for entertainment. It is a warning. The government prison in the heart of the city was built like a tomb. It was dark, damp, and smelled of death, rotting flesh and human waste. The air was thick with despair. Prisoners didn't leave this place alive. Everyone knew that. And it was here, in this pit of hopelessness, that her father, Adekunle, sat waiting to die. Not by the rope, which would have been quick. Not by a bullet, which would have been merciful. But by starvation. Slow, agonizing, deliberate starvation. That was his punishment. The commissioner had declared it. No food, no water. Just time, slowly draining away with every breath, every heartbeat, until his body consumed itself and his soul left this world. And Morenike, his only child, his beloved daughter, could do nothing but stand outside those bars and watch him waste away. Her father had once been a proud man, strong, respected. He was a merchant who traded in textiles and palm oil. He had built a good life for them after her mother died giving birth to her. He never remarried. He poured all his love into raising his daughter alone. He was the father who sang her to sleep when she was a baby, his deep voice echoing through their small concrete compound. He was the man who carried her on his shoulders through the market, laughing as she squealed with joy and pointed at everything she saw. He bought her roasted groundnuts and told her stories of their ancestors. He taught her to read, to think, to question the world around her. "You are my greatest treasure," he would say, kissing her forehead. More precious than all the gold in the government house. But then everything changed. A powerful government commissioner, Chairman Bassi, wanted Adekunle's warehouse near the main road. It was perfectly positioned for trade, and the chairman needed it for his own business ventures. He made an offer. Adekunle refused. The warehouse had been in his family for 3 generations. It was all he had to leave to Morenike. So Chairman Bassi built a case against him. False debts, fabricated contracts, witnesses paid to lie, accusations of cheating the government, of refusing to pay taxes, of insulting a member of the local council. The trial was swift. Adekunle had no powerful friends to defend him. He was just a merchant, a nobody. The verdict was announced before the sun set that day. Death by starvation in the government prison. The sentence would be carried out immediately. Morenike had been in the compound outside the courthouse, waiting. When she heard the verdict, she screamed. She tried to run to her father, but the police officers held her back. She clawed at them, bit them, kicked them. "Father, father, no, this isn't right. He's innocent." Adekunle turned to look at her one last time as they dragged him away in chains. His eyes were filled with tears, but also with a terrible final love. "Be strong, my daughter," he called out. "Live well, marry well, forget this pain." But how could she forget? How could she live when the man who gave her life was being buried alive in darkness? And Morenike's world shattered into 1,000 pieces that would never fit back together again. She had been married just 6 months before this nightmare began. Her husband, Ibrahim, was a quiet man, kind but cautious. He worked as a clerk in the local government office, copying documents and keeping records. It was steady work, respectable work, but not the kind that gave a man power or influence. Ibrahim loved Morenike in his own careful way. He had courted her properly, asking Adekunle for permission, bringing kola nuts and gifts, speaking kindly. Adekunle had approved the match, seeing in Ibrahim a stable future for his daughter. But Ibrahim was also a coward, not cruel, not unkind, but afraid. Afraid of authority, afraid of consequences, afraid of standing out. When Morenike begged him to help her father, when she fell to her knees in their small room and clutched his clothes and sobbed until she couldn't breathe, he shook his head slowly, sadly. "There's nothing we can do, Morenike," he said, avoiding her eyes. "The commissioner has spoken. It's the law. If I try to interfere, they'll come for me too. For us. Do you understand? We could lose everything. What is everything without my father? She screamed at him. What is safety if we buy it with his death? Ibrahim had no answer. He simply turned away, went to his small table, and buried himself in his papers. That was the first crack in their marriage. It would not be the last. But Morenike couldn't accept her father's fate. She couldn't just stand by and let him waste away in the darkness, alone, forgotten, as if he had never existed at all. So every day, starting the morning after his sentencing, she went to the prison. It was a long walk from her home, through the crowded streets, past the market stalls and food vendors, down into the older, darker parts of town where the government prison sat like a curse on the land. The warders knew her quickly. A young woman, beautiful despite her grief, coming every single day to visit the condemned man in cell 7. They let her stand outside her father's cell for a few moments, just to see him, just to hear his voice. It was permitted as long as she didn't try to help him, but they searched her, every single time, thoroughly, roughly. They checked her wrapper, her shoes, the folds of her dress, her basket. They even made her open her mouth to make sure she wasn't hiding food there. No food, no water, nothing that could help him survive. Those were the rules. On the first day, Adekunle had tried to smile when he saw her. His face was already thinner, his eyes already haunted, but he tried to be strong for her. "My daughter," he said, his voice weak but steady, "you shouldn't come here. This is no place for you. You have a life to live, a husband to care for. Go home to Ibrahim. Forget about me." But Morenike shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face and dropping onto the concrete floor. "I won't leave you, father. I won't. I'll come every day until... She couldn't finish the sentence. Until he died, she couldn't say it out loud. Adekunle reached through the bars with trembling fingers and touched her cheek. "You've always been so stubborn," he whispered, "just like your mother." By the third day, his voice was softer, raspier, like sandpaper against stone. His eyes were sunken deep into his skull. His lips were cracked and bleeding from thirst. His hands shook constantly. By the 7th day, he could barely lift his head. He lay on the floor of his cell, curled into himself, his breathing shallow and labored. When Morenike called his name, it took him several long seconds to respond. By morning, no one expected him to still be alive. "Father," she whispered, kneeling on the cold concrete floor outside the bars. "Father, please, please look at me." He turned his head slowly, with great effort. His eyes struggled to focus on her face. "Morenike," he breathed. "My beautiful Morenike." She reached through the bars, trying to hold his hand. It was cold. So terribly cold, like he was already halfway to the grave. "Father, please," she begged, her voice breaking. "Please hold on. I'll find a way. I promise. I'll find some way to save you." But what way? What could she do? She was just a woman, just a daughter, powerless against the might of the government. She went to the Council of Elders and tried to petition for mercy. They laughed at her and turned her away. She went to the local church and prayed for hours, offering what little money she had. The pastor took her money but told her God had already decided her father's fate. She even went to Chairman Bassi himself, the man who had orchestrated her father's downfall. She knelt outside his compound, calling his name, begging for an audience. His gateman threw water on her and threatened to call the police. Every door closed in her face. Every plea fell on deaf ears. At home, Ibrahim avoided her. He couldn't bear to look at her pain because it reminded him of his own weakness, his own failure to protect the man who had trusted him with his daughter. And then, 14 days after her father's imprisonment, Morenike gave birth. The labor was long and agonizing. She screamed for her father, calling his name over and over, wishing he could be there to hold her hand the way he had when she was a child and had nightmares. But he was in a cell, dying, and couldn't come. Ibrahim stood awkwardly in the corner of the room while the midwife worked. When the baby finally came, a healthy boy with strong lungs and Adekunle's dark eyes, the midwife placed him in Morenike's arms and smiled. "A blessing," she said, "a new life to balance the sorrow." But Morenike looked down at her son and wept bitterly. How could she celebrate new life when her father's life was ending? How could she smile when he would never meet his grandson? How could this baby be a blessing when it came wrapped in such unbearable grief? She named him Kunle after her father's father, hoping it would please Adekunle if he ever learned of it. But as she held her baby close, feeling him drink from her for the first time, feeling the nourishment flow from her body into his, she felt something break inside her. Her body was giving life to her son, while her father's body was consuming itself in a dark cell. The injustice of it, the cruelty, the impossibility of it all crashed over her like a wave. Ibrahim tried to comfort her, but his touch felt hollow. "You must rest," he said. "You must think of the baby now." But how could she rest? How could she think only of the baby when her father was suffering? The first few days after the birth were a blur of pain and exhaustion. Her body ached. She was swollen and tender. The baby cried constantly, hungry, needing her, demanding everything she had. And still she went to the prison. Every single day. Even when the midwife told her it was too soon, that she needed to heal, she went anyway. Ibrahim begged her to stop. "You'll make yourself sick," he said. "You need to stay home. The baby needs you." "My father needs me more," she shot back. On the 17th day of her father's imprisonment, 3 days after her son's birth, Morenike stood outside her father's cell and felt her heart shatter all over again. He was lying on the floor, barely breathing. His skin was grey, stretched tight over his bones like dried leather. His eyes were closed. For a terrible moment, she thought he was already dead. "Father," she cried out, pressing her face against the bars. "Father, please, please wake up." He didn't move, didn't respond. Panic seized her throat. She screamed his name again and again until a warder came and told her to be quiet or leave. She was quiet, but she didn't leave. She knelt there for an hour, watching his chest rise and fall, each breath weaker than the last. And then finally his eyes opened. Just barely, just enough to see her. "Morenike," he whispered. His voice was so faint she almost didn't hear it. My girl." "I'm here, father," she sobbed. "I'm right here. I'm not leaving you. I'll never leave you." He tried to smile, but his lips were too cracked, too dry. "Go. Home," he breathed. Let me go. Please." "No," she said fiercely. "No, father, don't you dare give up. Don't you dare leave me." But what could she do? What power did she have? That night at home, she sat in the darkness of her small room while her baby slept beside her. Ibrahim had already gone to bed, exhausted from his day's work and weary of her grief. She held her son close. Her body still ached from giving birth. She had fed him twice already that evening, but her body kept producing more than he could take. That was how it was in the early days. More nourishment than the baby could drink. And then, in that quiet darkness, a thought came to her. A terrible, impossible, sacred thought. She had nourishment, an abundance of it. Life-giving nourishment flowing from her own body. Her father had no food, no water. His body was eating itself from the inside, consuming muscle and fat and bone, because there was nothing else. But she had sustenance. She had life itself within her. Could it be possible? The idea horrified her. It was unnatural, forbidden, shameful. A daughter does not feed her father this way. It violated everything society said was proper and decent. But was it not also shameful to let him die when she had the power to save him? Was it not more unnatural to have life in her body and refuse to share it with the man who gave her life in the first place? She sat there for hours, wrestling with the thought, pushing it away, then pulling it back, examining it from every angle. It would be humiliating if anyone found out. Ibrahim would be ashamed. She would be mocked, scorned, perhaps even punished. Her reputation would be destroyed. Her son might grow up carrying the shame of it. But her father would live. Her father, who had sacrificed everything for her, who had raised her alone, who had loved her with every fiber of his being, would have a chance at life. What is shame, she thought, compared to that? What is reputation compared to love? The decision solidified in her heart like iron. She knew what she had to do. She knew the cost. But she would pay it. She would pay any price. By dawn, her resolve was absolute. This was not just desperation. It was devotion. It was the deepest kind of love, the kind that says, "I will give you my very body if it means you survive." She waited until mid-morning, when the warders changed shifts and the prison was less crowded. She fed her baby one more time, making sure he was content and sleepy. She left him with a neighbor, an old woman named Mama Ngozi, who had lost her own children and loved caring for Morenike's son. Then she dressed carefully. She wore a loose flowing wrapper that covered her completely, one that would hide what she carried. Underneath, she wore a simple blouse that was easy to loosen. She walked to the prison with her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. The warders searched her as always. Rough hands patted her wrapper, checked her basket, looked in her mouth. They found nothing. They never found anything. They let her pass with barely a glance. She walked down the narrow corridor into the depths of the prison. The smell hit her like a wall, thick and putrid. She nearly gagged but forced herself to keep walking. Cell 7, her father's cell. The door was iron bars from floor to ceiling, inside darkness. She approached slowly. Her legs felt like they might give out beneath her. "Father," she whispered. No response. "Father, please." A slight movement in the shadows, a groan, then his voice, so weak it was almost inaudible. "Morenike?" She looked around quickly. The corridor was empty. The warders were at the far end, near the entrance, talking and laughing about something. They weren't paying attention. She had a few minutes, maybe more if she was lucky. She knelt down, pressing herself as close to the bars as she could. Her hands were shaking so violently she had to clasp them together to steady them. "Father," she said softly, her voice trembling, I need you to trust me. Can you move closer to the bars?" He shifted slowly, painfully. Every movement seemed to cost him tremendous effort. He crawled on his hands and knees across the filthy concrete floor until he was close enough that she could see his face in the dim light filtering down from above. He looked like death. His cheeks were hollow, his eyes sunken so deep they looked like dark pits in his skull. His lips were cracked and bleeding. His hair, once thick and dark, was now grey and matted. "Oh, Father," she breathed, tears spilling down her cheeks. Why are you here?" he whispered. "You should be home, with your baby." "I am here because I love you," she said fiercely, "and because I can't let you die." She looked around again. Still no warders approaching. Her heart raced. This was it. This was the moment. If she didn't do it now, she might lose her courage. Her hands moved to her wrapper. She hesitated for just a second, feeling the weight of what she was about to do. Then she loosened it and pulled it open. "Father," she whispered, "I have something for you. Something that will keep you alive. The only nourishment the warders cannot take from us." He looked at her, confused, barely conscious. "What?" She loosened the shoulder of her blouse. Her body was ready. She had what he needed to survive. Adekunle's eyes widened. Even in his weakened state, he understood immediately what she was offering. "No," he breathed. His voice suddenly had strength in it, horror and love mixing together. "No, Morenike, I cannot. This is wrong. You are my daughter. This is not. We cannot." Tears streamed down her face as she reached through the bars and touched his face. "You are my father," she said, her voice breaking. "You gave me life. You fed me when I was a baby. You cared for me when I was sick. You gave me everything. Now let me give you life. Please, Father, please. I am begging you." "It's shameful," he whispered, his own tears falling now. "If anyone finds out, you'll be ruined. Ibrahim will leave you. The whole community will mock you." "I don't care," she said fiercely. "I don't care about any of that. I only care about you. You're dying, Father. You're dying right in front of me, and I have the power to save you. How can I not use it? How can I live with myself if I let you die when I could have saved you? But your son, he needs this." "My son will have enough," she said. "There is enough for both of you. There is always enough when it comes from love." He wept then, openly, his whole body shaking with sobs. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for being weak. I'm sorry for putting you in this position. I'm sorry for everything." "Stop," she said gently. "Please, Father, there's nothing to be sorry for. Just, please, let me do this." He was too weak to refuse anymore, too hungry, too close to death. His body betrayed his shame, his mind surrendered to his desperate need. And so, hidden in the shadows of that cold prison, with the stench of death all around them and the warders laughing in the distance, Morenike fed her father. She gave him the only nourishment the warders could not confiscate, the only thing she had that could keep him breathing. She leaned as close to the bars as she could, turning her body at an angle. The bars hid most of what happened between them. He leaned forward and she brought him close, and he drank from her. It was humiliating. It was sacred. It was the most shameful and the most holy thing she had ever done. She turned her shame into sacrifice. She felt him take from her, felt the life flow from her body into his. And she wept. She wept for the horror of it, for the beauty of it, for the desperate love that had brought them to this moment. He took for several minutes, slowly, weakly. Then he pulled away, gasping, his face wet with tears. The front of her blouse was damp. She adjusted it quickly, pulled her wrapper closed. Her whole body was shaking. She felt dizzy, overwhelmed, like she might faint. "Thank you," he whispered. "Oh, my daughter, my precious girl, thank you." "I'll come back tomorrow," she said, "and the next day, and every day after that. I won't let you die, Father. I won't." He reached through the bars and touched her hand. One last time, his fingers squeezed hers weakly. "I love you," he said. "I have always loved you. You are the best thing I ever did in this world." Then she heard footsteps, heavy boots on concrete. A warder was coming. She stood quickly, composed herself, and walked away from the cell as calmly as she could, though her legs were trembling so badly she could barely walk straight. The warder passed her in the corridor, gave her a brief glance, and kept walking. He suspected nothing. She made it outside into the sunlight and collapsed against a wall, gasping for air. What had she just done? What had she become? But when she thought of her father's face, of the gratitude in his eyes, of the small chance she had just given him to survive, she knew she would do it again. She would do it every day if she had to. Because that's what love is. It sacrifices, it gives, it doesn't count the cost. And she did. She came back the next day, and the next, and the next, and every day after that for 12 more days. Each time was the same ritual, the same terror, the same shame, the same fierce, unshakable love. Each time she risked everything. Each time the warders could have caught her. Each time her secret could have been exposed. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Because a daughter's love is stronger than fear, stronger than shame, stronger than anything in this world. Each visit made it harder to hide what she was doing. At home, Ibrahim began to notice changes in her. She was distant, quiet, haunted. She would sit for hours just staring at nothing, lost in her own thoughts. "Are you well?" he would ask. "I'm fine," she would lie. "The baby is crying. He needs you." "I know. I'll go to him." But there was a coldness between them now, a distance that grew wider with each passing day. He knew something was wrong, but he was too afraid to ask, and she was too ashamed to tell him. Meanwhile, at the prison, something impossible was happening. Her father began to survive. It shouldn't have been possible. No one survived death by starvation in the government prison. No one. The average prisoner lasted perhaps 2 weeks before their body gave out completely. But Adekunle was now on his 18th day, then his 20th, then his 25th, because a man sentenced to starve should not still be breathing. Slowly, impossibly, he grew stronger. Not much. He was still skeletal, still weak, still in constant pain, but his eyes regained a small light. His voice returned, though it was hoarse and broken. He could sit up for longer periods. He could hold a conversation. The warders were baffled. "How is this man still alive?" they asked each other. "He should have been dead by now. What is keeping him going?" One of them, a younger warder named Chidi, began to grow suspicious. He had seen Morenike come every day without fail. He had watched her kneel by the cell, watched her lean close to the bars, watched her stay for longer than most visitors. "What does she do in there?" he asked his fellow warders. They shrugged. "Talks to him, I suppose. Prays. Women do that." But Chidi wasn't satisfied. There was something about the way she positioned herself, the way she looked around nervously, the way she hurried away afterward. It didn't sit right with him. That was the day someone started watching her hands. On the 28th day of Adekunle's imprisonment, Chidi decided to watch more carefully. Morenike arrived at the usual time, mid-morning when the prison was quietest. She went through the search. She walked down the corridor. She knelt by her father's cell. Chidi followed at a distance, keeping to the shadows, moving quietly. He saw her look around nervously. He saw her loosen her wrapper. He saw her lean close to the bars at an odd angle. And then he saw. He saw what was happening between them. He understood how the old man was surviving. For a long moment, Chidi stood frozen, his mind struggling to understand what his eyes were seeing. Disgust, horror, confusion, all of it mixed together in his head. But then something else crept in, something unexpected. Pity, sadness, and a strange, reluctant admiration. Because what he was witnessing was not perversion. It was not something shameful or dirty. It was devotion, sacrifice. A kind of love so powerful, so selfless, that it transcended all social boundaries. He should have shouted. He should have called the other warders. He should have dragged her away and had her arrested. But he didn't. Instead, he quietly stepped back into the shadows and returned to his post, saying nothing. For 3 more days, he kept her secret. He watched her come and go, watched her give what the warders could not seize, watched her use herself to keep her father breathing bit by bit, day by day. And he said nothing. But prisons do not allow miracles to repeat without punishment. But on the 31st day, his superior, the chief warder named Officer Okafor, noticed something odd. He had been reviewing the records and saw that prisoner Adekunle in cell 7 had been there for over a month. "That's impossible," he said to Chidi. "No one lasts that long. What's going on?" Chidi hesitated, then, knowing he couldn't hide it any longer, he told him. Everything. Officer Okafor listened in silence. His face showed nothing. When Chidi finished speaking, Okafor stood up, put on his cap, and said coldly, "Show me." The next morning, when Morenike arrived, both Chidi and Okafor were waiting. They let her go through the search. They let her walk to the cell. They let her kneel down, and then they followed, silent as death. Morenike, lost in her desperate routine, didn't hear them approach. She loosened her wrapper. She leaned toward the bars. Her father, still weak but more alert than he had been in weeks, saw her and moved close. And that's when Officer Okafor stepped forward, flashlight held high, and his voice shattered the silence like thunder. "Stop!" Morenike gasped and spun around. Her hands flew to her wrapper, trying to cover herself. Her face went white with terror. Adekunle cried out weakly, "No, please, she has done nothing wrong." Okafor stared at them both, his expression unreadable. Chidi stood behind him, looking uncomfortable, ashamed, like he had betrayed them, even though he had protected them as long as he could. "Stand up," Okafor commanded Morenike. She stood, trembling so badly she could barely stay on her feet. Her wrapper was disheveled. The front of her blouse was damp. There was no denying what had been happening. "What is your name?" Okafor asked, though he already knew. "Morenike," she whispered. "My name is Morenike. And this prisoner is your father?" "Yes. Do you understand what you have done?" Tears streamed down her face. "I have kept my father alive," she said, her voice shaking. "That is all I have done." Okafor was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to Chidi. "Take her to the holding cell. I will report this to the council." "No!" Adekunle screamed, suddenly finding strength he didn't know he had. He lunged at the bars, reaching for his daughter. "No! Take me instead. Punish me. She has done nothing. She was only trying to save me." Morenike turned back to him, tears streaming down her face. "It's all right, father. It's all right." "It's not all right," he sobbed. "I should have died. I should have just died and spared you this." "I would rather die 1,000 times than lose you," she said. And then the warders pulled her away. They took her to a small cell on the other side of the prison. It was cold and dark and smelled of urine. They didn't chain her, but they locked the door. She sank to the floor and wept. Great heaving sobs that tore through her body. What had she done? What would happen to her now? What would happen to her baby? To Ibrahim? But even in her terror, even in her despair, she didn't regret it. She couldn't regret saving her father. Hours passed. She didn't know how many. Time lost all meaning in the darkness. Finally, the door opened. Officer Okafor stood there, his expression still unreadable. "Come with me," he said. She followed him in silence, her legs weak, her heart pounding. He led her upstairs, through corridors, out into the blinding sunlight. She blinked, disoriented. They were in the town square, the great open space where the market happened and the people gathered. And ahead of her, sitting in judgment, were the council of elders and community leaders. Her blood ran cold. This was it. This was the end. Officer Okafor spoke first. "Honorable elders," he began, his voice carrying across the square, "I bring before you a matter most unusual. A young woman, Morenike, daughter of the condemned prisoner Adekunle, has been discovered feeding her father. She has given him the only nourishment she could give to keep him alive." A murmur rippled through the crowd that had gathered. Shock, disgust, fascination, the elders looked at each other, some with raised eyebrows, others with expressions of revulsion. Chairman Bassi, the man who had condemned Adekunle in the first place, stood up, his face red with anger. "This is an abomination," he shouted. "She has defiled our laws. She has interfered with a legal sentence. She must be punished." But then another elder stood. An old man named Elder Adeyemi, a man who had seen many governments come and go, a man respected for his wisdom. His white hair caught the sunlight as he raised his hand for silence. "Let the woman speak," he said. "Let us hear her defense before we condemn her." All eyes turned to Morenike. She stood there, small and fragile in the midst of this powerful assembly. Her wrapper pulled tight around her, her face still wet with tears. "Speak, child," Elder Adeyemi said gently. "Tell us why you did this thing." Morenike's voice was soft at first, barely audible, but as she spoke it grew stronger, fueled by the fire of her love. "He is my father," she began, "the only family I have left in this world. My mother died when I was born. He raised me alone. He worked every day to feed me, clothe me, give me a life. He sang me to sleep when I had nightmares. He held me when I was sick. He taught me to read, to think, to question. He loved me with every breath in his body." She paused, her voice catching. "And then you took him from me. You sentenced him to die. Not quickly, but slowly, painfully, in the darkness. You asked me to stand by and watch while he wasted away, to do nothing while his body consumed itself." Her eyes met Chairman Bassi's, and there was fire in them now. "But I am his daughter. I am the child he gave life to. How could I let him die when I had the power to save him? How could I live with myself knowing I had life in my body and refuse to share it with the man who gave me everything?" She turned to address all the elders now, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "You call it shameful. You call it an abomination. But I call it love. I call it duty. I call it what our ancestors taught us, that a child must honor their parent above all else. Is it not the duty of a child to care for their parent? Is it not the highest honor to sacrifice for the one who sacrificed for you? My father gave me life. I gave it back to him. That is not shame. That is sacred." Silence fell over the square. Even the market women stopped their chatter. Morenike stood there, breathing hard, waiting for their judgment. For a long moment, no one spoke. The crowd was split. Some faces showed disgust. Others looked away in shame. A few young men whispered to each other, shaking their heads. "This is madness," one muttered, "unnatural." But then an old woman stepped forward from the crowd. Her face was weathered, her back bent. She looked at Morenike and began to weep. "She saved him," the old woman said, her voice cracking. "Her own father. What else could she do? Let him die?" Another voice rose from the crowd, a mother holding a baby. "I would do the same," she said quietly. "For my father. For my child. Love does not count the cost." Then a man's voice, trembling, "My daughter would do the same for me. That's real love." But others protested. "It's against nature," someone shouted, "against God." "What kind of God?" an elder woman shot back, "would condemn a child for saving their parent?" The square erupted into murmurs. Arguments broke out. Mothers clutched their children. Fathers stood silent, their eyes wet. The crowd was no longer unified. They were torn, wrestling with what they had heard, trying to decide if what Morenike had done was sacred or shameful. And then Elder Adeyemi stood again. His white hair caught the sunlight as he raised both hands for silence. Slowly, the crowd quieted. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. In all my years, he said, through all the governments I have lived under, all the injustice I have witnessed, all the pain I have seen, I have never witnessed such devotion. This is not shame. This is what it means to be human. This is what our people should aspire to be. He turned to face his fellow elders. If we punish this woman, we are not leaders. We are monsters. We are worse than the colonial masters who came before. We spit on the very values we say we hold dear. His voice rose, passionate now. She did not steal. She did not cheat. She did not murder. She loved her father. She honored him. She gave of herself to preserve his life. And we would condemn her for that? One by one, other elders began to stand. Some nodded, others spoke in agreement. Release the father, said one. Pardon them both, said another. Make this an example of virtue, not punishment, declared a third. But Chairman Bassi refused to relent. This is chaos, he shouted. If we allow people to disobey sentences, what is the law worth? What power do we have? Elder Adeyemi turned to him, his eyes hard as stone. The law exists to serve justice, he said, and there is no justice in punishing love. The vote was called. One by one, the elders cast their votes. Some abstained. A few sided with Chairman Bassi. But the overwhelming majority voted for mercy. Adekunle would be pardoned. His sentence was lifted. He would be released from prison that very day. When the announcement was made, the crowd erupted in cheers. People wept openly, strangers embraced, mothers kissed their children. Fathers held their daughters close. Morenike collapsed to her knees, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe. She had done it. She had actually done it. Her father would live. Warders were sent to bring Adekunle from his cell. They had to carry him because he was too weak to walk. They brought him out into the square, blinking in the bright sunlight like a man emerging from a tomb. The crowd fell silent as he was set down gently on the ground. He looked around, confused, barely conscious. And then he saw her, Morenike. She ran to him. She threw herself into his skeletal arms and held him as he wept. Father, she sobbed. Father, you're free. You're free. My daughter, he whispered, his voice breaking. My beautiful, brave, impossible daughter. What have you done? What have you sacrificed for me? Everything, she said, smiling through her tears. And I would do it again. I would do it 1,000 times. The crowd cheered again, louder this time. Ululations filled the air. People clapped and sang. It was a moment the town would never forget. But the story was not over yet. As Morenike helped her father to his feet, preparing to take him home, she saw a figure standing at the edge of the crowd. Ibrahim, her husband. His face was pale, his eyes were wide with shock. He had heard everything. The whole town had heard everything. Morenike's heart sank. What would he say? What would he do? Would he reject her? Would he divorce her? Would he take their son and leave? Ibrahim walked toward them slowly, the crowd parting to let him pass. When he reached Morenike, he stopped. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then Ibrahim did something no one expected. He fell to his knees before her. Forgive me, he said, his voice breaking. I was a coward. When you needed me most, I failed you. I failed your father. I chose safety over righteousness. I chose fear over love. Tears streamed down his face. But you, he continued, looking up at her with something like awe in his eyes, you are the bravest person I have ever known. You are stronger than any man, wiser than any elder. You showed me what real courage looks like, what real love looks like. He took her hand. I don't deserve you, but if you'll have me, I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you. Morenike, exhausted and overwhelmed, could barely speak. But she nodded. She pulled him to his feet. And together, with her father supported between them, they walked home through streets lined with cheering crowds. The next weeks were a time of slow healing. Adekunle had nearly died. His body was wrecked, his strength gone. But Morenike cared for him, this time with soup and yam and medicine. Ibrahim became a different man. The shame of his earlier cowardice burned in him, transforming him. He took Adekunle into their home, gave him the best room, waited on him hand and foot. He apologized again and again until Adekunle finally said, "Stop, son. You are here now. That's what matters." Morenike's relationship with her husband slowly mended. The distance between them closed. Ibrahim would hold their son and say, "When you grow up, I will tell you about your mother, about how she was braver than anyone I ever knew." And Morenike would smile, tired but at peace. Chairman Bassi, humiliated by the public outcry, quietly withdrew from public life. His reputation was ruined. People spat when they said his name, even his own colleagues avoided him. But Morenike never celebrated his downfall. She felt no joy in revenge. She had what she wanted: her father alive, her family together, her conscience clear. Months passed. Adekunle regained some of his strength, though he would never be the same. His hair had gone completely white, his body was still thin and fragile, but his eyes had light in them again. And he smiled. He played with his grandson, little Kunle, bouncing the baby on his knee and singing the same songs he had sung to Morenike when she was young. The baby would laugh and reach for his grandfather's beard, and Adekunle would weep with joy. "I thought I would never see this," he would say. "I thought I would die in darkness, alone. But you gave me this. You gave me life. You gave me hope." Morenike would kiss his forehead. "We gave each other life, father. That's what family does." Years passed. That was how the story of Morenike and Adekunle became legend. The elders spoke of it in their meetings. The young people whispered about it in the market. And mothers told their daughters, "Be like Morenike. Love like Morenike. Sacrifice like Morenike." The story spread from compound to compound, from village to village, carried on the lips of those who had witnessed it and those who wished they had. Chairman Bassi's name was forgotten, but Morenike's never was. When she was old, grey-haired and bent with age, young mothers would bring their daughters to meet her. "Is it true?" they would ask, and Morenike would smile. "Love does what it must," she would say. "When someone you love is in need, you give what you have." Adekunle lived for another 20 years, long enough to teach his grandson to read, long enough to die peacefully in his own bed with his daughter's hand in his. His last words were simple: "Thank you, my girl, for everything." That is why, even today, in markets and compounds and family gatherings, when people speak of sacrifice and devotion, they remember the story of Morenike, the daughter who turned her shame into survival, the story that makes mothers weep and fathers hold their children close. Love is stronger than shame, stronger than fear, stronger than death itself. If you enjoyed this story, I'm certain you'll enjoy the next one showing on your screen right now. Please click on the thumbnail to watch the next story. I'd appreciate your support. Like this video, share it with your family and friends, and subscribe to my channel. See you in my next story. Bye.